Good afternoon, everyone. My report is all about contemporary philosophies of education, specifically its definition, history, and philosophy. Now, let's proceed to the definition of existentialism. Allow me to give you at least 8 definitions. Number 1, the existentialist uses existence to refer specifically to human existence. Number 2, there is a common belief that only a concrete thing can exist. 3, man as a concrete individual capable of being an existent. 4, to be an existent, one has to be capable of being conscious that one exists. In this sense, man alone can exist. Number 6, according to Gignon in 2013, he writes that existentialists hold that humans have no forgiven purpose or essence laid out for them by God or by nature. It is up to each one of us to decide who and what we are through our own actions. 7, according to Lawless in 2005, writes that existentialists believe that there are no universal standards for human life. We are what we do, the sum of our actions. Number 8, according to Dignan in 2011, he writes that existentialists believe that there is no God, and therefore human beings were not designed for any particular purpose. As there appears to be no preordained meaning of life, humans are free to choose how they will live. Now let's proceed to the history of existentialism. Existentialists appear in early Buddhist and Christian writings, including those of St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas. In the 17th century, Blaise Pascal suggested that without a God, life would be meaningless, boring, and miserable, much as later existentialists believed, although, unlike them, Pascal saw this as a reason for the existence of a God. His near contemporary, John Locke, advocated individual autonomy and self-determination, but in the positive pursuit of liberalism and individualism, rather than in response to an existentialist experience. Existentialism in its currently recognizable form was inspired by the 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, the German philosophers Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, Karl Jasper, and Edmund Husserl, and writers like Russian Fyodor Dostoevsky and the Czech Franz Kafka. It can be argued that George Wilhelm Friedrich's development of existentialism, because the philosophies of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche were written in response or in opposition to them. Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, like Pascal before them, were interested in people's concealment of the meaningless of life and their use of diversion to escape from boredom. However, unlike Pascal, they considered the role of making free choices on fundamental values and beliefs to be essential in the attempt to change the nature and identity of the chooser. In Kierkegaard's case, this results in the knight of faith, who puts complete faith in himself and in God, as described in his 1843 work entitled Fear and Trembling. In Nietzsche's case, the much maligned Overmensch or Superman attains superiority and transcendence without resort to the otherworldliness of Christianity. In his books, Thus Spake Zarathustra in 1885 and Beyond Good and Evil in 1887. Martin Heidegger was an important early philosopher in the movement, particularly his influential 1927 work, entitled Being in Time. Although he himself vehemently denied being an existentialist in the Sartrean sense, his discussion of ontology is rooted in an analysis of the mode of existence of individual human beings, in his analysis of authenticity and anxiety in modern culture, making him very much an existentialist in the usual modern usage. Existentialism came of age in the mid-20th century, largely through the scholarly and fictional works of the French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Simon de Beauvoir. Maurice Merleau-Ponty is another influential and often overlooked French existentialist of the period. Sartre is perhaps the most well-known, as well as one of the few who have actually accepted being called an existentialist. Being and Nothingness in 1943 is his most important work. In his novels and plays, including Nausea in 1938 and No Exit in 1944, helped to popularize the movement. In The Myth of Sisyphus in 1942, Albert Camus uses the analogy of Greek myth of Sisyphus, who is condemned for eternity to roll a rock up a hill, only to have it roll to the bottom again each time, to exemplify the pointlessness of existence, but shows that Sisyphus ultimately finds meaning and purpose in his task simply by continually applying himself to it. Simon de Beauvoir, an important existentialist who spent much of her life alongside Sartre, wrote about feminist and existential ethics in her works, including The Second Sex in 1949 and The Ethics of Ambiguity in 1947. Although Sartre is considered by most to be the preeminent existentialist and by many to be an important and innovative philosopher in his own right, others are much less impressed by his contributions. Heidegger himself thought that Sartre had merely taken his work and regressed it back to the object-oriented philosophy of Descartes and Husserl, which is exactly what Heidegger had been trying to free philosophy from. Some see Maurice Merleau-Ponty as a better existentialist philosopher, particularly for his incorporation of the body as our way of being in the world, and for his more complete analysis of perception. Now let's proceed to the philosophy of existentialism. Existentialism is a philosophy that emphasizes individual existence, freedom, and choice. It is the view that humans define their own meaning in life and try to make rational decisions despite existing in an irrational universe. It focuses on the question of human existence and the feeling that there is no purpose or explanation at the core of existence. It holds that as there is no God or any other transcendent force, the only way to counter this nothingness is by embracing existence. Thus, existentialism believes that individuals are entirely free and must take personal responsibility for themselves. It therefore emphasizes action, freedom, and decision as fundamental, and holds that the only way to rise above the essentially absurd condition of humanity is by exercising our personal freedom and choice. Often, existentialism as a movement is used to describe those who refuse to belong to any school of thought repudiating of the adequacy of any body of beliefs or systems, claiming them to be superficial, academic, and remote from life. Although it has much in common with nihilism, existentialism is more a reaction against traditional philosophies such as rationalism, empiricism, and positivism that seek to discover an ultimate order and universal meaning in metaphysical principles or in the structure of the observed world. It asserts that people actually make decisions based on what has meaning to them rather than what is rational. Now, to include in my report, there are 7 themes of existentialism. Number 1, rejection of meaning-giving narratives. Existentialists do not believe that there is a God who gives life meaning. We were not designed with any purpose set out for us. Interestingly, some existentialists are still religious. For religious existentialists, there is a God, but He has not left any trace or evidence of how we should live our lives. Still, it's up to us. Other existentialists do not believe there is a God at all. This has made them pause and wonder how they can give meaning to their own existence. Number 2, existence precedes essence. Essence, in a sense, who we are, our identities. Existence, in a sense, the fact that we are alive right now. Existence precedes essence is Jean-Paul Sartre's famous phrase. Existentialists believe that we have to choose for ourselves who or what we will become. Remember, they don't think God left any clues about how we should live our lives. It's up to us. Stop searching for the purpose of life, they would scream. You must create purpose for yourself. Now that you exist, you must create your own meaning of life. Here's how Gignon explains it. What this means if we first simply exist, find ourselves born into a world not of our own choosing, and then it is up to each of us to define our own identity or essential characteristics in the course of what we do in living out our lives. Number 3, life is absurd. Things that make no sense and have no meaning are said to be absurd. You might have used this term when hearing a man screaming nonsense on the street. He makes no sense to me, you might say. This man is absurd. Well, to existentialists, life is absurd. It makes no sense to them at all. Number 4, we live a life of despair. When we realize our lives have no meaning and no purpose, and that our existence doesn't make any sense, we might despair. It is, after all, an overwhelming thing to come to terms with. But to existentialists, there is no point hiding from the meaningless of life. Just because it's an unfortunate truth, it doesn't mean you should run off and find solace in something that's untrue. Number 5, we always have freedom in choice. Now that you know life is absurd and meaningless, what you are going to do about it? Something nice about existentialism is that you're free to choose your own path. Existentialists strongly believe that we have the free will and agency to choose our own path in life. How will you make meaning out of your own life? Will you sit around and play video games all day? Or will you get up, get motivated, and find a way to create something of yourself? But I feel like my choices are constrained by my circumstance. Many people who read existential philosophy say, but I don't have free choice all the time. What about the poor or prisoners? They have less choices and freedoms than rich people. This is true, and the existentialists agree. Here's how you, in 2010, explains this issue. Through arguing that we are the result of our choices, existentialism does not deny that we are shaped through our situation, but rather argues that we can make something out of any given situation through our choices. So no matter how bad life gets, we should always think about what our options and act on them. There are always options. Number 6, we have a responsibility to be authentic. We are free to choose our own life, but we must choose our own life. This quote from Jean-Paul Sartre highlights that making choices is very difficult. How do we know that we are making the right choices for our own lives? The freedom to make choices is a big responsibility. What are the right choices for our lives? According to existentialists, our responsibility is to make authentic choices. This means that we need to make choices that are true to ourselves. We must always reflect on whether our choices are the right ones for ourselves and for creating a personally meaningful life. What would give you fulfillment in your life? According to existentialism, you need to make choices that will help you obtain that fulfillment. We will call the choices that lead you in the direction of a fulfilling life authentic choices. Last one, number 7. Existentialism is a humanism. Humanism is a philosophy that believes we should focus on enhancing human life. We should ensure humans' emotional, social, psychological, and physical health is paramount in our minds. Many other philosophies try to focus on one thing, like psychology or cognition, but not existentialism. Existentialism keeps its focus on the whole range of human emotions and how the human being can create a meaningful life for themselves. Therefore, existentialism is said to be a form of humanism. Before I end my report, allow me to reiterate the emphasis of existentialism's philosophy, which are individual existence, freedom, action, choice, and decision. To end this up, may I say that we, human beings, must use our existence, freedom, action, choice, and decisions rightfully for us to attain the paramount meaning of our life. This is my report, and thank you very much. May God bless you.